Hi there. Sorry I was taking care of some serious business. Speaking of serious business, please enjoy this clip from Mornings with Mike Winters, which, by the way, you can watch the show in its entirety at roswellstalkfm.com.
From Builders Do It Center is Justin Ellis. Good morning, sir.
Morning, Mike. How are we doing today?
Doing pretty good. How about yourself?
I'm fantastic, man.
All right. Well, we either got an episode of MacGyver coming up, or we're talking about plumbing, because we got a plethora of fixtures here in front of us.
Well, it's a little bit of both, I would say. Plumbing is always an interesting subject, and in my experience, you tend to end up MacGyvering a fair amount of things. At least I do.
Sure.
So.
Well, and I think in the world of plumbing, I mean, if you're going to find MacGyver situations, I think plumbing offers the most opportunities to do that.
Plumbing does. Electrical and HVAC, there's a lot of them, too. I follow a couple of Instagram accounts that are from professional plumbers and electricians, and they basically post pictures of things they've discovered that other people have built. It's frightening what some folks will put together. So you can MacGyver things, definitely with plumbing, and sometimes you have to.
Right.
But there's a right and a wrong way to MacGyver things. There's
sure.
Yeah, there's rigged, where it's going to break, and that's bad. And there's creative solutions to challenging situations, which is very good.
Sure. So you could be like the real MacGyver or the MacGyver wannabe.
Pretty much, yeah,
and
exactly.
one is excellent, one the complete opposite of excellent.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, one's an insurance claim waiting to happen.
Yes.
And the other has running water.
Sure. And plus, I mean, obviously and you probably find this more on homeowner repair situations, because obviously when they're building, there's codes and things and inspectors, and so you're less apt to see it there. It's when folks make their own home repair, or say I'm going to put a new sink in, but it doesn't quite match the old specs of the sink that was there, and so they got to do a little. Yeah,
they've remodeled the kitchen, and the sink has moved from being underneath the window to being across up the wall 10 or 12 feet, and rather than doing the correct thing, which would have been to cap the drain, cap the supply lines, put everything back in the wall, run all your supply lines and drains inside the wall to the new location. I've seen photos where folks will drill through all the cabinets, so 4 or 5 cabinets, and run a section of drain pipe inside of the cabinets instead, and that's just not right.
Yeah.
It's not going to end well for you.
No. It looks bad. It probably will lead to other issues.
Yeah,
and
every time.
At the bare minimum, if you're trying to sell the house, someone's going to see that and be like,
Yeah, it should fail a home inspection. If you see that and your home inspector doesn't say anything, might want to find a new home inspector.
Yeah,
so
that's a clue.
Yeah, there are indicators of such things. This would be one.
Very good. All right, so well, let's probably, before we get into the nuts and bolts or pipes and glue of this situation, as far as tackling home projects when it relates to plumbing, I mean, obviously experience is the deciding factor on when you determine, hey, I can knock this out, versus, hey, I should call a professional in.
A lot of it's that and comfort level.
Okay.
Plumbing's one of those things where if you understand it conceptually, it doesn't necessarily mean you can be successful at actually implementing what you want to do. I'm a great example of this. I understand plumbing very well. I've sold plumbing my entire life. I can talk about it all day long like I know what I'm talking about. My own projects at home don't often go the way I want them to. I'll work on sprinklers.
Yeah.
I'm actually very good at that. I enjoy it. I'd like to think I'm good at plumbing, because I always go, oh, no, I can fix that. That's no big deal. And it seems like about 75% of the time when I take on a plumbing repair in my own home, I get about halfway into it and run into some roadblock. Not that I don't understand what to do, but I just simply can't get it done because I don't have the right access. Just some issue. And I end up calling the plumber anyways. The good news is I've got a pretty good relationship with the plumber that does most of our work, and so they're never surprised.
Right. You're kind of on call.
Yeah, they kind of just show up and they're like, hi, what'd you do this time?
Right.
And I go, well, I did this. And
start a tab.
Yeah, exactly. And thankfully I've done some of the work, and they don't actually charge me for fixing what I've screwed up typically, which is very decent of them, I would say.
Sure.
So it really depends. If you feel comfortable dealing with a plumbing repair, especially if it's something simple, if you've got an exposed pipe in a basement or something that's got a leak in it and you just want to replace a fitting, that's a great one to try because it's pretty straightforward.
Okay.
You take the old one out, you put the new one in, and it either leaks or it doesn't. Fixture replacement is another one that in theory works very easily, but as an access issue, my recommendation is if you want to try it. The worst thing you can do is to have to call a plumber.
Sure.
Now, one thing you want to keep in mind with any repair is before you cover anything back up, put drywall back up, put it behind wood, you want to make sure that it's not going to leak if you're doing it yourself. Because, plumber's got a pretty good confidence that they've done this repair before. If it's your first time fixing PEX pipe, I'd highly recommend you make sure that it works before you cover it up with drywall and then discover 6 months later or a week later that it's not quite the repair you had in mind.
When folks come across, when you start to do, let's say you're replacing pipe or things like that, obviously, like you said, leaking is the big worry, is whether it's going to leak or not. Generally, though, I mean, are you going to find out right away if there's a leak, or is there that potential where, okay, it doesn't look like it's leaking now, but like a week later you look at it and there's a small leak or something?
There is always the potential for a slow leak. That's one of the reasons I'd recommend turning the pressure on and waiting a little while.
Okay.
And making sure that before you turn the pressure on that you've dried that connection real good with something so that you can touch it and tell it's dry. That way, if you turn it on and there's any moisture, you know that moisture is coming out of the pipe, not residual from you having worked on the pipe.
Gotcha.
And it's, there's a pretty... I learned a cardinal rule of plumbing when I was in high school working at the store from a guy that taught me a lot of wisdom about the hardware. I had two people that basically taught me this industry, along with customers mostly. One's my dad, who's my boss still, and the other one is a guy named Tom Gray that I worked with for years and years. And Tom had been in the industry forever and was really a source of wisdom on a lot of subjects. Not so much on others, but mostly wisdom. And one of the things Tom taught me is that there's two rules in plumbing. You can get the water there any way you can, but you always got to drain it downhill. So pretty much if you're having a plumbing issue, it's going to be one of those two problems. Either you have a supply issue or a drain issue. And they have different challenges. So you always want to make sure that depending on what kind of repair you're doing, that you really keep that in mind, what that goal is, and then work through the best way to accomplish it. But yeah, you could have fast leaks, you can have slow leaks. There's leaks that you turn the water on and then whatever you've just done basically explodes on you, which I've had happen. And I've made connections where I thought it was secure. I dried it off. I turned the water on. I come back and check it an hour later, and there's just some moisture there. And with plumbing connections, it's very binary. Either it doesn't leak and it's perfectly dry, or it leaks and it's not.
Gotcha.
There is no middle ground. A little water is not okay. Any water is a problem. The water is supposed to stay 100% within the pipes.
Sure. Well, I mean, eventually, and even if you're one of those folks, it's just a slight deal, eventually it's going to get bigger because that's a weak spot in the pipe. There's pressure there, and it's going to find weak spots and make them worse, basically.
Well, and a little water over a long period of time causes a lot of damage. I'm actually in the process of finishing redoing the floor in the bathroom at our home, because I had a plumbing leak. And it probably was this way when I moved into the home, and I just didn't notice the connection between the PEX coming out of the floor in my bathroom. And thankfully, I have a very old home, but the owner before me repiped it, which is...
Saved you that headache.
Oh, gosh, yes. They did 2 or 3 things like that I am so thankful for not having had to do to a 100-plus-year-old home. But that connection where it comes into the supply valve was leaking. And not much. I mean, it was leaking so little that most of the time if you went down and put your hand on it, you actually couldn't feel water because it was almost evaporating as quickly as it was coming out. But over the course of a number of years, it caused the subfloor to weaken. It caused the tile to crack. And so I ended up having to pull all that tile out, pull the woodwork out, had a little bit of mold issue I had to deal with. Nothing major, just a little bleach and a little scrubbing and some Moldex, and I was fine. Do some patching to the subfloor, put down new hardy backer and put down new tile, and I'm finishing that project up. That was not a lot of water.
Sure.
It was not. I would bet that over the course of a year, it was not leaking 5 gallons of water over the course of a year.
Wow.
But that water was sitting on that floor and causing other issues.
And that's the one thing with plumbing, too, is one of the few where, left unattended creates other projects. And so now a plumbing project turns into a plumbing project, a carpentry project, a tile project. Others get away with that not so much, but plumbing pretty much every time. If the problem is too
especially
big,
over time, unless you catch something pretty quickly, you're probably going to have some issues. You may just have some paint or some drywall that needs to be dealt with, but if you leave water long enough, you will end up with major structural issues.
Gotcha.
If I'd let that issue at my house remain for much longer than I had, I could have had some major problems that would have required significantly more work than what I ended up having to put into that project.
Gotcha.
Worked out pretty well. We got a nice tile floor out of the deal, which makes both myself and my wife happy.
Sure. But at the time, wasn't such a
No,
fun
it's a project we wanted to do. We just didn't want to do it when we had to do it.
Right. Yeah, it was by necessity instead of choice.
Exactly.
So let me ask you this, because I'm thinking and I could be wrong, but I'm thinking one of the issues a lot of folks have, plumbing, is using the right pipe for the right job. I would guess, because there's so many different sizes, materials, if you're copper piping to PVC piping, and obviously the materials used are specified for certain jobs. Like you don't want to use certain types of pipe for certain projects.
That's accurate, and the bigger issue is once your system, your plumbing, and you got to think of plumbing as a system. From on the supply side, meaning the water coming in, that's everything between the fixture, so where the water comes out into a sink or a shower or into an appliance, all the way back to your connection to your city water meter. Everything in the middle I think of as a system.
Gotcha. That
system needs to work together, and there's certain things you can't mix and match within that system. You'll end up with issues with corrosion down the road. The bigger problem with mixing different kinds of pipe without the right connectors is they just don't work together. So all pipe is sized in one of two ways, and this is some really important terminology to understand because it's going to make your job easier, because if you're looking at a fitting, a lot of times they'll have some notations on it, but it's all going to be kind of in code. And if you can decode that, you're going to have a better idea of what parts you need. And then when you come into our store, we're going to be able to better help you find what you need.
Gotcha.
So those two terms as far as size that you really need to keep in mind is ID versus OD, or inside diameter versus outside diameter. So some pipe is measured by the outside of the pipe, outside diameter, and some is measured by the inside of the pipe, inside diameter. That's why you can have two pieces of pipe. A good example of this is PVC and CPVC, very closely related, slightly chemically different. Half-inch PVC and half-inch CPVC are not the same size.
Okay.
Now, that's specifically done that way so that you can't mix the two because you don't want to. The other words that you sometimes will hear for ID and OD are IPS and CTS.
Okay.
IPS stands for iron pipe size. So this is leftovers from when we use a lot of threaded iron pipe or metal pipe for a lot of plumbing connections. Iron pipe size is an inside diameter. So a half-inch IPS is the same thing as a half-inch ID. CTS stands for copper tubing size, and it comes out of the sizing for standard copper tubing, which is still very common in certain applications. And you don't see a lot of copper in residential new construction, except at the very high end of homes. It's a great system. It's just expensive because copper is very pricey. But you do see a lot of it in commercial and a lot of it in industrial. So copper tubing size is based on outside diameter. So a half-inch CTS pipe is going to be half-inch outside diameter, and that's not necessarily even if it's copper. So CPVC, PEX, those are all done in CTS sizes. So they're the same size as a piece of copper tubing. A half-inch piece of copper tubing has the same outside diameter as a piece of half-inch PEX or half-inch CPVC.
Gotcha.
And those products can be interchanged with the right connections. So the second thing that you really want to understand about your pipe, and this is all information that you want to have coming into the store to work on a project, because if you have this information, we can kind of walk you through the parts. We can put it together for you.
Okay.
And then all you got to do is go do the actual hard work.
So I'm guessing if you don't know this information, it would be best to take pictures of the things you're looking at?
Absolutely. Look at the pipe itself. If it's fairly new, most pipe, and for those of you that are watching online, I've got a piece of CPVC in my hand. They actually print the size and a bunch of other information on the side of the pipe, and that's really, really helpful. This PVC is the same way.
Okay.
But take photos. It is not going to hurt anything. We love it. I cannot say enough times the camera phone is a great home improvement tool and a home repair tool. Snap 50 photos, come in and show them to us. If there's labels, take pictures of the labels. Even if it's old barcode tags, we may not be able to look at the barcode, but most barcode tags will have a little extra information that will help us determine what that product is.
Okay.
And then not only take pictures of the little pieces you're looking for, kind of take pictures of the whole area. What's
Gotcha.
around it, what it's connecting to, what's a couple of pieces in either direction, because we may want to recommend making some other replacements. So the other kinds of pipe that you want to keep in mind that you may run into are metal pipes. So copper being very common. The other two that are fairly common, one is galvanized pipe, which used to be the most common thing used in plumbing. There's a lot of this in homes in Roswell.
Okay.
If you have the opportunity to replace galvanized, I would highly recommend it. One thing, you never want to mix galvanized pipe and copper pipe in the same system. You'll have a galvanic reaction Basically, you're going to take electrons. There's going to be some chemist or a science teacher listening to this. I'm going to get this wrong, and I apologize in advance. I unfortunately, Brian Luck, who's the principal at Goddard that we get to see at our tailgate parties, was my freshman science teacher.
Oh.
Really good teacher. I wasn't the best student. So, Mr. Luck, if you're listening, I apologize if I get this galvanic action thing wrong. You're going to be stripping electrons off of the iron pipe and depositing them upon the copper pipe, which means that the iron pipe's going to get thinner and thinner, and the copper pipe's going to get thicker and thicker.
Gotcha.
And eventually you'll end up with a leak on the copper, and the water won't be able to get through the copper pipe you won't be able to get water through, and the iron pipe will leak.
And would you pretty much have to cut it to separate at that point? Or?
Well, the issue is that you're going to get less and less water through it. You can actually get them apart.
Okay.
You just want to be careful. And this isn't just in direct connection. So if you have a section of copper pipe somewhere in the house and water is flowing through that copper and then through plastic pipe and then it flows through galvanized later on, you want to be very careful about that. You really should avoid it if at all possible, and you never want to make a direct connection between the two.
Gotcha.
So, galvanized, if you get the opportunity to replace it, do. If you just need a replacement piece, it's still a perfectly good product. It doesn't leak. We carry a ton of galvanized parts. Brass is another common thing. Brass is a really good product. You can mix brass and copper, but you cannot mix brass and galvanized because there's copper in brass.
Gotcha.
Brass is an alloy of copper. The brass is expensive, but it's really good for small pieces. So if you just need a little threaded nipple for something, we often use brass for that application. There is a third kind of metal pipe that you will occasionally see used in plumbing, and it's wrong. If you see it, you need to take it out and do not use it. That's black iron pipe. So this is a raw steel pipe.
Okay.
It's got no galvanization, interior or exterior, no paint, no coating, no nothing. It rusts virtually instantly when you put water in it. What it's intended for is gas piping, and other applications where you're just using it to like build a little nightstand or something. A lot of people will use black pipe for that because it's inexpensive compared to galvanized.
Sure.
It's the same size as galvanized. It's an IPS-sized pipe, so you have to be very, very careful of mixing those two.
So it'll fit, but it won't be right.
It won't be right. It will rust, and it will rust fast because it's just raw steel. So it's like taking a piece of raw steel and dropping it into a bucket of water. It's going to rust very, very quickly.
Sure.
So the second category of pipes that we think about most of the time, and this is probably the most important group in terms of market share. So this is what goes in most new construction homes now. It's our go-to for repairs, and that would be plastic pipes of some kinds. There's 4 primary plastic pipes that you see in homes now, 3 of which we sell, the other one of which doesn't. Actually, there's 5. I will cover the 5th. The 2 that you don't see much, one is a product called ABS. It's a black plastic pipe that was used for drain, waste, and vent, so no supply lines. It used to be very common in New Mexico. We actually don't keep ABS parts. We can get them. There's not much ABS left. It used to be really common in the mobile home industry, and it's still really common in California, but we've just moved away from it in the Southwest. I don't actually have a good explanation for why. We just don't use as much of it. You can interchange it with PVC, but you cannot glue one to the other, so you have to have a rubber pipe boot connector if you ever have to make that connection.
Okay.
And if you have ABS, get with us. We can help you with that. You connect it just like you do cast iron pipe, which there used to be a lot of cast iron drain pipe installed in New Mexico, so you may run into that too if you're working on drains. Just keep that in mind. Let us know. We can help you work with it. It's not a big deal.
Sure.
And drains are always easier to repair because there's no pressure. They don't naturally want to leak.
Right.
So if your drain leaks, you A, probably have a stoppage of some sort, or B, you have a really bad connection. The second category would be PVC and PVC pipes. PVC and CPVC are both vinyl-based pipes. The difference between the two is the C in CPVC stands for chlorinated.
Okay.
And a little bit of chlorine to the polymer, and it makes it more resistant to heat. One of the issues with PVC is if you get it hot and it stays hot long enough, it actually has a tendency to crack over long terms. It makes the plastic unstable. CPVC doesn't have that problem. In the 90s, both those products were very common for new construction installs. There's virtually none of them used now. They're tougher to work for with the plumber. They're a little harder to install. They have some long-term durability issues inside the wall just because they're stiff pipes, and so they don't want to move. There's no reason to replace them. They don't leak, but you don't see it installed in new construction very much. But we see a ton of it used in repairs, and both PVC and CPVC are very good for some projects. Sprinklers, you always want to use PVC. There's a lot of other applications where PVC and CPVC are common. The fourth category of plastic pipe, and this is one that's not used in anywhere in the country anymore, is a product called polybutylene.
Okay.
So if you have a gray pipe in your home, that's polybutylene. Polybutylene is a plastic. It was very common in the late 80s and the 90s, and it went out of favor because they discovered it had some long-term durability problems. In fact, at one point, there was a couple of class action lawsuits against the manufacturers of that polybutylene product that led to them paying for a lot of people to have their homes repiped. If you find you have polybutylene, I don't know that you have any legal recourse at this point, but if it's not leaking, you're okay. It's not dangerous.
Right.
It just has the tendency to want to leak. The problem is there's not a lot of fittings that work with polybutylene. It's a plastic pipe, but it's a little different sized. It's actually not an IPS or CTS size like we were talking about earlier. It's a totally different animal. And originally it was installed with a crimp fitting. Those crimp fittings are, to my knowledge, are impossible to get anymore. So what we recommend if you have a polybutylene system is we carry an adapter from a company called Flaret that adapts that polybutylene to a product called PEX. And PEX has kind of become the focus of the plumbing industry. I don't know what the market share of PEX is in new construction, but in residential, it's got to be close to probably 90+%. Outside of very high-end homes that are getting installed with copper, virtually everything gets installed with PEX. And PEX is a flexible plastic tubing. It comes in sticks, 1, 5, 10, 20-foot sticks, and it also comes in rolls of 250 and 500 foot, which you see used a lot for new construction because the plumbers can actually pull it almost like you would wire in an electrical install, which is great because you have fewer connections, which is fewer places it can leak, which is also less expensive. Pipe's relatively cheap. And fittings aren't particularly expensive, but they're more expensive than the pipe they go with. So the fewer joints you have, the less money you're going to spend and the less issues you're going to have down the road.
Gotcha.
So we always recommend that if you have a polybutylene system that you have to work on, that you make an adaptation. You cut your polybutylene and replace everything from there going towards the fixture that you possibly can with PEX. PEX is a pretty awesome product. We really like working with it. It's easy to cut. And the right way we recommend cutting PEX, PVC, CPVC, or even polybutylene that's been installed in a small diameter, so 1/2 or 3/4 inch, would be with a pair of these plier-type tubing cutters.
Okay.
So these are really easy to use. You basically just put the pipe in it. They've got a ratchet action, so you just clamp down on it.
Okay.
They give you a good, square, clean cut. There's no dust. There's no nothing. And they're very easy to use compared to, say, using a hacksaw. A hacksaw to me is only if you have no other options, a bigger pipe, something like that. Otherwise, we recommend using the tubing cutter.
Gotcha.
So once you've cut it with a tubing cutter, you can join that PEX in a number of different ways. One of the ways we always talk about is shark bites. So shark bite is there's a couple of different brands. We still sell shark bite because it's really a great product. That shark bite has become a catchphrase or a generic name for a lot of quick connect systems for piping. So this is a shark bite fitting I actually have in my hand. It's got an inner sleeve and an outer sleeve in a brass fitting. And you basically take and push. I'm actually disassembling this currently.
There you go.
Well, that was good and loud. Sure, that came across the radio great, folks. Sorry about that. You basically just push the pipe into the fitting.
Okay.
And once it goes home, you can't feel it move anymore. You've got a good connection. Even I can put PEX or CPVC or copper, all of which will fit inside of a shark bite fitting.
Okay.
Which is great because lots of times you'll see those products mixed, and they're all the same size because they're a CTS copper tubing size. So once you have them in, you're done. You're good. The fittings themselves are kind of expensive. You don't see a lot of plumbers using shark bites for new home installs. You'll see people using them for repairs because they're so quick. You don't need another tool. They're disassemblable. There's a little orange clip that you can buy that we carry that's like $2 that you can actually use to push that sleeve back out and remove that piece of pipe from that connection.
Okay.
So if you put something together and you did it wrong, you can take it apart, which is kind of nice.
Which probably happens a lot.
It does. It happens to me. This is one of the few plumbing connections and plumbing fixes that I'll do all day long. I have PEX in my own home, and if I can put a shark bite connection on it, I'll do it, and I don't have to call a plumber because I can't screw it up. So it's pretty simple if I can't screw up that connection. The other way of connecting PEX, and this is the way that you see most commonly in new construction, plumbers will use it if they're if they're able to, because it's a less expensive connection, is a crimp fitting. So the little fitting comes, it's a brass fitting as well. It inserts inside of the PEX pipe, and there's a band that goes around the outside, and you use a special tool to crimp that band.
Okay.
There's also a ring system that you can crimp with a pair of pliers that we also sell. If you're doing a remodel project and you're going to have a number of connections, more than 3, 4, 5, I would highly recommend going to this system. It's much less expensive. The fittings are probably a third or less the price of the equivalent shark bite fitting. And they can get even less than that. We sell them in a contractor pack for the common connections, elbows, tees, couplings, things like that. They come in a 10-pack, and they get very reasonably priced. That's a great system. Now, it's a little trickier than the push fit system, so you have to be sure you know what you're doing.
Right.
I actually have not personally used this, so I don't know whether or not I can do it.
You're qualified.
I know it's doable, and I understand the process. I just haven't tried it yet because I haven't needed to.
So practice first if you're going to try that, maybe.
Absolutely, and there's something called a go-no-go gauge that you can actually check your connection with afterwards. And assuming you cut the pipe correctly, prepped it correctly, and that go-no-go gauge shows that you got a good crimp on it, you're probably good.
Okay.
There's a couple of alternative systems for installing PEX that you'll see plumbers use, but they're very similar to that crimp-type system.
Okay. We're running short on time. Is there any information we definitely need to get that we didn't get a chance to talk about?
No, we hit the high points. Now, mostly we talked about pipe repair today.
Right.
I know on a later episode we're going to talk some more. We're going to talk plumbing repair, faucet or toilet repair, faucet
fixtures,
repair,
things like that.
drainage. So if you got how to clear a stop in your sink, that kind of thing. Plumbing is such a broad subject,
right?
But it's a really interesting one, and it's one of the most common problems people run into. Probably the second most common home repair item after maybe a light bulb replacement is a stopped sink or a running toilet.
Yep.
Both are pretty easy to fix, and those are definitely skills you want to have as a do-it-yourselfer that can help you avoid an expensive call to a plumber.
Sure.
Or at the very least, you want to understand what you're going to do when the plumber gets there.
And plus, there's a lot of those products that you can buy like the grocery store and use, and some probably work great, some not so much, and you got to know which one's the good ones and the bad.
Absolutely, and you got to understand what you're up against.
Yeah.
There's no universal tool, no magic bullet for a lot of fixes, especially for things like drainage issues. So you want to make sure you're using the right approach for your particular problem.
Gotcha. Very good. Of course, if anybody has any questions about anything we're talking about here, like I said, come by the Builders Do It Center here on South Main, and any of the folks there can put you in the right direction of what you need to do.
Absolutely.
Check out your YouTube channel for Builders Do It Center. You'll catch this particular episode up there in just a little bit, but previous ones there as well. You can find them on our website, but you got to do some digging there. So, but again, if you have any questions, and like you said, the more information you present to your guys, the easier it will be for you in the long run. So.
Absolutely. Yep. Come and see us. Call us. If you're looking at it in the house and you got some questions of what to look for, pick up the phone and call us.
Definitely.
We'd be happy to talk you through it before you come into the store.
Absolutely. And also, don't forget to come out to the Wool Bowl early tonight. 5:30 p.m., the Builders Do It Center tailgate party, also sponsored by the folks at Farm Bureau Financial Services, Epic Cinema 10, RPM, and I'm missing one.
Roswell Nissan and Roswell Nissan is we are partnering with Roswell Nissan to give away a Yeti. So I don't know the details of how they're running it.
Okay.
But I know that there is going to be an opportunity, I believe, starting this evening to register to win yourself a brand new Yeti package. Actually.
Okay. Cool.
So it's going to be a cooler, bottle, probably a hat or a T-shirt or two. So some really cool stuff.
Excellent. Good deal. So come out early tonight and have some fun with us and help out the Band Boosters by getting a hot dog and a Pepsi product as well. Well, Justin, appreciate it, and we'll see you tonight, all right?
Thanks, Mike. See you this evening.
Take care.